Welcome everyone to another exciting bad online evening event. COVID did have some positive sides because we started to do this and we can see people from all over the world, which we never could do before. My name is Catherine Dupeloup-Ménager and I'm the artistic director of Bad Sydney. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, to waters and to culture, and pay respects to elders past and present. I'm speaking to you from Camaragal land, and I'm sure that you'll all be watching from a lot of different places in Australia and indeed overseas. Now we have a really huge treat tonight. We have Lynda La Plante talking to us from the UK. Welcome, Lynda.
Thank you.
Now, you'll know Lynda from her books, but also from her hugely successful television shows. Widows was the first one, there's Prime Suspect, there's Tennyson, there's many, and I can see those BAFTAs behind you, so maybe we can talk about those in a little bit as well. Lynda trained as an actress before and worked in on stage and then in television before picking up the pen or the typewriter and writing what she had been acting in, or perhaps not what she'd been acting in. Perhaps that's the whole point. We're going to talk tonight about your career, Lynda, but also about your latest book, Vanished. You'll be interviewed by Professor Sue Turnbull, who is professor of, and I'm always forgetting this, so I've got it written down, senior professor, no less, of communications and media at Wollongong University. But what you also are is probably the best known crime reviewer in Australia. You've been reviewing for, I don't know, decades, 10 years, 20 years. You're an ambassador for Sisters in Crime. You do a huge amount of interviewing. You, Mrs. Crime Australia, Madame Crime Australia, perhaps we'll say that. I also want to thank our sponsors, the City of Sydney and Create New South Wales. When we have in-person events, they're usually at the State Library of New South Wales, and we couldn't really do anything we do without those sponsors. So thank you so much. And tonight you'll be able to go to Booktopia, with whom we have a relationship, to buy Vanished, but also all of Lynda's books. And we welcome all members of the BAD community, and particularly members watching from libraries or who found out about us from libraries throughout New South Wales. And that's it's lovely to have you here. And we hope there are some people from Lismore. I hope there'll be a few, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We'll be running the event as follows. I'm going to disappear shortly. Lynda and Sue will have a great time for about 50 minutes, an hour. Sue will remind you to send questions in via the Q&A function, not the chat function, the Q&A function. I'll come back just before the end and thank everybody. So, Sue, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. That's lovely. And hello, everybody. And just to say hi, and just to also tell you that there's a storm circulating here on the East Coast. And I keep getting messages which tell me that I'm unstable, which I knew. And if that happens while we're talking, I may hop out. Catherine's got my questions and I'll hop back in. But the internet is a tad unstable here at this time, as everybody would understand. But it is my great joy and pleasure to be talking to Lynda La Plante after 25 years. And 25 years ago, Lynda, you and I talked, and that's us. And Catherine was actually astonished. She asked me who the other woman was. You are instantly recognizable. Apparently I'm not. I've completely altered the shape of my face. Maybe I'm I don't know, maybe I've disappeared and come again. But that was us at the Comedy Club in Melbourne. And I astonished you at that particular event because I had prepared by reading every single book you had written, which included The Legacy and The Talisman that you started reading in 1987. And you told a wonderful story about being a first-time author and submitting your first manuscript to your publisher. And I wondered if you would possibly revisit that, because it was just such a glorious story about wanting to write, but not knowing exactly what you were doing. It was wonderful.
Do you want the whole story? Shall I repeat it all?
Not the, maybe the abridged version.
I'll do an abridged version, but basically I had a concept that what I was going to write about was the Cray brothers, how two notorious English criminals that were, you know, the biggest, hardest men in England. And during some flipping books or papers, I discovered that their father was a Romany. So I thought, oh, I'll do some research into Romany gypsies. And I ended up in Wales because there were a very large campsites in Wales. And bit by bit, I began to extend the story. And I didn't start it in the 50s or the 60s. I went back to the 20s and 30s. And once I got started, I couldn't stop writing. But I didn't know how to catch up to where I was supposed to be going. And I just kept on writing. I loved it so much. I was enjoying every single second of actually writing all the stories that I kept on finding. I mean, one of the biggest things that happened to me was at a bookshop in Colwyn Bay in Wales. There was a tray of, and it said everything on the tray, like I think it was like 2 shillings or 5 shillings. And I picked up a manuscript, and I thought it was so sad that somebody had typed this huge manuscript, and there it was with a piece of string just on a kind of throwaway tray. So I bought it. When I opened it, it was a personalized lifetime history one man had done of the Romany gypsies. I mean, it was like manna from heaven to me because it had a language in it, like Manushi is my love. So I mean, I'm now into a whole new genre. I mean, I'm so far beyond the craze, I can't tell you. And it went on and on, and I didn't know how to stop it. Now, usually when you present your first novel or first manuscript, you're about, what, 400, 500 pages? I mean, I had no idea. I was 1,700. And I could hardly lift it. But when it went in to the publishers, there was a sort of, it was the wonderful Sunny Mehta. And he said to me, look, I'm going to be reading your manuscript, The Legacy, over the weekend. Perhaps we could have a drink Sunday lunchtime, because I'll be reading it Saturday, you know. So he arranged for me to meet him at 12 o'clock. And there was a panic call at around 11 o'clock. Hello, Sonny. I'm waiting my way through. I don't think I'm going to be quite finished. The calls kept coming. Sorry, I'm not with you. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And eventually when I went to see him, the poor man was sitting. It looked as if he was sitting amongst stacks of my book. I mean, there were pages of it. And he didn't quite know what to say. He said, Lynda, you know, most people, when they're writing a novel, try and control about 50 characters at the very most. The Legacy, I think, has got around 500. He said, if anybody opens a door, another character comes in. If they look through a window, another character comes in. He said, I don't really know what to say to you, except it's got to be cut. Cut. And I sat there having no knowledge of what I'd done. But reality is that remains in my soul as what turned me to be a writer, because I had to learn so much about editing. And shall I keep on telling you about this? Because there's another funny story about it. But
well, yes, please do, because a question I was going to ask you is, what did you learn in, you know, in the interim? But go back to where you were.
Okay, well, you know, an editor came in to sit with me to go through the cuts, and when I was typing it, I had a help typist who used to clean it up a bit, because, you know, the spelling was a bit out of the window, and I didn't have any of this now, you know, correct your spellings thing that virtually the computers now want to write your book for you. So she used to do the manuscript. She never, ever said a word. I'd give her a stack of typed manuscript and she'd come and she'd finish that. Anymore? Never. Good. Never liked it. Not one word. Anyway, she was sitting in on this meeting. And the editor said, she said, what we have to look at, Lynda, is the areas in the book that really do not have any connection to the end story. So she said, for example, Tuppence, the Jack Russell. Now, you've written an awful lot about Tuppence, this Jack Russell, who during the war got into terrible trouble because he used to take his mistress's basket in its jaws with a little purse and money to go to the butcher's. And he would return with the basket and the purse and the goods from the butcher's, skedaddling around any other dog that dare come and buy and sniff the basket. But he was quite famous in the village. And then when the war started and there were no sausages and there were no meat for sale, he used to get a little bit crazy and destroyed the basket until he just had the handle in his mouth. And eventually he was so attacked by other dogs going, where's the food? Where's the chocolate? And so she finished, she said, I think that entire section about Tuppence should be cut. The voice from my secretary. I don't think so. And it was, she never discussed one line of the book. And so we turned towards her and she said, personally, I think it's the best part of the book. And I just said, all right, well, we'll leave it in. It's the best part of the book. Thank you very much. But that's the learning thing eventually, you know, cut. And when you, you know, go, to actually keep a pace is very necessary.
So you've learned that. You've learned about the pacing. You've learned about the editing. So you can self-edit now. You can pace yourself better.
Now you leave a chapter at a point where a reader will want to go on to the next chapter. And so that was all a big learning curve. Yeah. And it also, the biggest learning thing for me was the love of it. And yes, I loved writing.
That is vividly apparent when you're reading your books, and I want to make sure that we do get to discuss Vanish. So I'm going to come up to Vanish now because it's number 3 in your series with the Detective Jack Warr. So it's a police procedural, and I'm just really intrigued by this because I think it'd be lovely to hear from you about where Jack Warr came from, because he belongs to what I'm going to call the Lynda-verse, which is, you know, how in fan fiction they have the Buffy-verse, they have the this, and you've actually created your own fictional universe that I'm going to call the Lynda-verse. And Jack Warr has a very particular place in it. So I wonder if you would just introduce us, because I also want to tell the readers that I read this first and then I went back and it didn't hurt me at all to read this one first and then go back. I'm actually enjoying that archaeological exercise as well. But tell us about Jack Warr.
Well, you know, because you're a crime writer, you do have to keep abreast of every crime show, all the crime writers that are coming out. And across the board, most crime detective, they've either got a drug problem, a marriage problem, or an alcoholic. They've always got troubled, tormented lives. And in my experience, meeting so many detectives and working alongside so many detectives, I discovered that there were some fabulous guys and some very happily married guys, but they were all wonderful characters. So I wanted to create a character that was immediately likable. He doesn't have any problems. He adores his girlfriend, who subsequently becomes his wife and the mother of his child. He has no interest in other women. He has found the woman that he adores. He's also very, very gentle and loving to his adoptive parents. and the pain when his father dies, his adoptive father dies. He has very little recall of his past, the first 5 years of his life. And, you know, I do a lot of radio shows and talk to a lot of fans and readers over the phone and on TV and things. And one reader asked me, what happened to Harry Rawlins' son, baby? And it was a question that came so far out of the background. I went, what? And then I remember, now, for those who don't know who Harry Rawlins was, my first big hit TV series was Widows. And Harry Rawlins played the really sort of quite glamorous, but very bad criminal, married to the infamous Dolly Rawlins. And I thought, what did happen to him? And that was another kind of, you know, like a bong in the head. I thought, I'll use that. So Jack uncovers the fact that his real father was Harry Rawlins, a known murderer, criminal, bank robber. And he's never quite understood that there's something buried inside him that he doesn't quite understand. And that is a darkness. So it is there and under control, but as a very competent police detective, he's not what I would call a very, very good team player. He does go off kilter a bit. And I like that. But also, you know, he does play a risk game all the time. He's always taking risks. And I like that as well. And if you say and ask someone, I have given myself a very long rope in the hope that the series, you know, from Buried, Judas Horse, now Vanished, is it going to go on? Is he going to go on? Are the readers going to want more of him? I have given myself a rope that could very easily hang him. And so you see him touching, doing things illegally, but because the result in the end is always very positive, that gets slightly hidden. But it will depend. I quite like the fact that I've written someone you really like. You don't want him to get into trouble, but somehow you know that he will eventually.
Oh, I wish, you know, I sort of knew you were going to say that, and I was hoping you wouldn't say that, because I really like him too. And, you know, after the Morses and the Rebuses and the Wallanders of this world, I just found the portrait of his family life, his relationship, his baby and his mother living upstairs was just wonderfully refreshing to actually have that solid, happy relationship. It's just a complete switch around in terms of, you know, the usual portrayal of that dysfunctional detective.
Yeah. Also, I quite like the fact that his wife is in actual fact more intelligent than she. I mean, she is a qualified doctor going on to do surgery. She's also clever enough to know when to shut the wall. Yeah. Not push him. Yeah. But he does have that a very dangerous level to him.
Yes. Well, you mentioned Widows, and guess what? And I just, before we started, I just played the first 15 minutes of Widows, and remembering it was 1983. And I mean, those of us who were of a certain vintage, and I was living in England at the time, so I saw this. I mean, I'm from the north of England, and I watched this when I was living in Cambridge when it was on, and I remember the impact it had in terms of how different it was to what you saw. And just looking at it just before we started, and I was looking at the smoking, I was looking at the drinking, I was looking at the misogyny, I was looking at the world. So why, in your opinion, was Widows such a stunning breakthrough at that moment? Why did it change the way we looked at television?
Well, for one, it came out of like a backfield because nobody'd ever seen any of these women.
Yeah.
You'd never ever seen them in an EastEnders. You'd never seen them in a soap, Coronation Street. They were fresh faces. Also, it was very unusual to have a Black actress as a leading role.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, it was showing a middle-aged woman who became an iconic figure. The actress playing her was called Anne Mitchell. She's a superlative actress.
Mm.
And the danger they lived in and the toughness of these women had never ever been seen before. They'd either been created as, you know, terrible bleached blondes and all spoke like that. Suddenly you had women coming onto the screen that were dangerous because they were real. She was a real East End woman. And when the actress Anne Mitchell came in to read for the part of Dolly Rawlins, she didn't look like her character at all. She was slightly overweight. She had very permed, frizzy hair. And she walked in and she said, I've waited all my life for this part. This is mine. You cannot give this to any other actress. It's my part. I want it. And she read superbly. And then she left. And I turned to the director, who was called Ian Toynton, a wonderful guy. And I said, what did you think? And he said, she scared the pants off me. And I said, she's Dolly Rawlins. And back she came with the hair. Now, the reason, the way she dressed as a character was when I was writing it and doing the research, I was very broke and used to work on a Saturday morning in a market stall, mostly selling rubbish that I'd collected or, you know, from around the house. And there was a woman on another stall, a fruit and veg stall, and she used to be saying, lovely tomatoes, come here, darling, feel these. Look at that lovely ripe tomatoes. These are hard, they're soft, apples, lovely. She used to wear this headscarf and then a woolly hat and a big coat, fur boots, tough. And one of the other stall holders, who was an ex-actress, said, you know, you're writing that TV show with the, that woman's husband is in for murder at Pentonville prison. I said, really? She said, don't talk to her. So I went up and I said, excuse me, I hope you don't mind me talking to you, but she said, piss off. Pardon? She said, go off, off, off. I must have gone up to this woman maybe 4 or 5 times. And every time was off, get off, not interested. And then one time she came to me and she said, come over for a cup of tea. When I met her in her own environment, when she opened the front door, the hair that was always buried under this hat was beautifully coiffured, perfect makeup, and in an immaculate Jaeger suit. She was, and her voice was different. And she just looked at me and said, surprise, surprise. I will never forget that expression on her face. But you see, that becomes a piece of information that when we're talking costumes and styles, and we've cast it, the costume designer immediately said, oh, criminals' wives, yes, I think it'd be sort of lycra, wouldn't it, rather cheap? I said, oh, no, no, this is cashmere, this is Jaeger, this is smart, we've never seen this before. And that everything that built up slowly added to the difference in what came onto the screen. And also the fact that you saw a phenomenal actress showing you the raw side of grief. And in fact, you know, yes, they did a criminal, insane thing, but they were driven by a woman who was driven by grief to begin with, but then driven by a fury when she knew she had been betrayed. And so that was a combination that really drove Widows forward. I still look in wonder at the performances.
Yeah. And you know, when you're describing this and you're actually performing and you're acting for us, you're playing parts. One of the things that strikes me about reading Vanished is that I can see it on screen as I'm reading it. I can, the whole scenario in the middle of the book where Jack actually gets married, the pre-scenes to that, the wedding itself, it's almost like it's already a treatment for a screenplay. And I can't help thinking that your writing is absolutely informed by your experience as an actress, about character, where they are, how they speak. Is that how you write?
Yes, in fact, I think a number of times people have been very shocked. You know, they've come up to my office to talk to me, and they haven't come in for a long time because they were absolutely certain I was having conversations with people. And I wasn't, I was talking to myself. You know, I was up here going, oh, well, anyway, yes, you know, and I get very, as I'm writing the lines, but the reality is when I go through it, you know, checking it, you think that line isn't right. That doesn't fit right. So that is, again, you know, writer, actor, editor, they keep on crisscrossing, because I think so much of the dialogue has to lift up. And if it doesn't work for me, then a reader's going to say, that's not, you know, I have to hear how they speak. And with Vanished, you know, people say, well, where does something come from? You know, why did you, what kicked off Vanished? And I was asked to go by invitation with somebody I knew just socially, a very nice man, just knew him socially. There was no other deep relationship at all, but he was a very nice social. And he had an invitation, and he said, oh, it's a house quite close to you. And he said, and they've got a little Greek amphitheatre. Now, pause for thought. You think, a house near me with an amphitheatre? This doesn't make sense. I mean, the houses near me are virtually, you know, elbow to elbow. And it was in walking distance, within 20 minutes walk. And when I got there with him, the gates were huge rock high gates, hedges, you couldn't see the house. And when these gates slowly opened, there was a world that literally 8 acres of, in fact, unbelievable gardens, swimming pools, this very small little amphitheatre cut into grass ledges. I just couldn't believe the power of this house, hidden, completely hidden from anyone else, and in such close proximity, and I had no idea it was there. That house stuck in my head. And in actual fact, you see it is the opening in Vanished.
It is, and you give us a wonderful, quirky older woman too, who I really liked. You know, she's obviously, and everybody underestimates. I actually really enjoyed, and Jack Warr appreciates her too. He likes her despite himself. So where did she come from?
She's a bit like me, I think. She's a bit like me. She has the same temper as I've got. But it's like, you know, again, this is a key to his character. Jack, they get this case from this woman, Avril, because she's been contacting her local police station over and over and over again. And they're really getting very, very tedious about, she's saying she's being stalked by a lodger. B, she's being absolutely harassed and they are stealing from her. So she keeps on reporting all these thefts, and they keep sending an officer to interview her and another officer. And she's saying, you're looking for porcelain, beautiful porcelain figurines have gone. And, you know, one of the officers does find them in her fridge. So it's getting to be very irritating. And it sort of lands on Jack's desk, more or less to say, clear it up. You know, either you have to say to this woman over and out, stop it, you know, forget it. But when he meets her, he can't help but love her. I mean, she accuses him of everything. She is so funny. She's quite tough,
Yes.
very funny, but something is very, very wrong.
Yeah.
And there's a massive greenhouse. And I'm not giving away too much of the plot, but
No,
there's a
you're not.
massive
No.
greenhouse. And, you know, he's made inquiries with a few neighbors. And the lodger is called Adam Border. And he keeps getting these extraordinary descriptions of him. Rather handsome, youngish, mid-30s, well-spoken, drives a Porsche. So he's taking all these notes. You know, is he stalking this? Is he stealing things from this? Very personal, strange things. Sometimes she says she's stolen a wedding photograph of my poor darling dead husband. He's taking things that mean something to me. And so Jack really, he rather likes her, sends in his report, and then comes the backlash. An terrifying fire breaks out in her ginormous greenhouse. And it's cannabis farm, massive cannabis farm. I mean, the firemen can't go near it. They're all getting stoned out of their heads. But it goes one brutal thing after another. And when her body is found, it is a horror.
Yeah.
Horror.
I was very sad. I was very sad that she had to die. But you know, I noticed the way that you relished Avril Jenkins, you know, Adam Border, and Jack Warr with 2 R's. Names are very important in your books. Jack with 2 R's, Warr with 2 R's. Rather than W-A-U-G-H, which would be war, we've got Warr, W-A-R-R. Tell us a little bit about your choice of names, because I've got a feeling that they're instrumental in your thinking about characters.
You have to, because you repeat them so often.
Yeah.
When a name doesn't run easily, it's really, really annoying. And you keep having a full stop or a glottal stop. So a name has to ring easily, and a name you like. So, and you don't want to bring a name that is very popular with other novels or other writers. You've always got to look for one thing, but the most important thing is finding a name that runs, that is like, it's like music, really.
Yeah.
And so every name that comes in, I test it out and work it out. Often I change names because they don't run. They're not musical enough.
Yeah. But your characters become so real. I mean, Harry Rawlins, for example, you know, in Widows, I think I've heard you talking about the fact that you met someone who actually thought the character was real. Yes,
it was the BBC had done some kind of competition for short films to be sent in, and 15-minute short films. And they'd chosen a short film to be made, and it had been written by a traveller. And they brought him in, and they said, have you any idea about who you'd like to play as the leading role? And he said, oh, yes, I know. He said, yes. So they said, well, who would you like? And he said, Harry Rawlins. So they said, all right. And, you know, they wrote down Harry Rawlins. Okay, well, we'll check him out with Spotlight and his agent and everything. We'll get back to you. So eventually they're going, you know, we can't find a Harry Rawlins in Spotlight. I mean, what actor? What is it? So they had another meeting with him, and they said, we're having trouble finding Harry Rawlins for you. And he said, what do you mean? He's married. He was married to Dolly Rawlins. Widows. And they then realized that he actually believed Harry Rawlins was a real character. So after he left, they had a little discussion. And they said, why don't we bring him in, the same actor? And they said, oh, good idea. So they brought the same actor in. And they'd been having a lot of problems with theft on the set. You know, they no sooner put, you know, a tray of crockery or something, and it was missing. He arrived in, you know, the limo, got out. The entire group of men nodded to him. Nothing went missing. Everyone behaved. And he was apparently he was very, very good in the role as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's again, incredible compliment that something is so real.
Yes.
And one time, you know, I forget sometimes. I was doing a book signing in Liverpool, and I wrote a trilogy. It was called Cold Shoulder, Cold Blood, Cold Heart. And I worked with a very tormented, very dangerous woman. And it became very, very difficult for me to handle her. In Los Angeles. It's set in LA. And truthfully, the only way I thought I'm going to get away from this woman, because she was dangerous. She had been a high-ranking police officer and drug addict, turned to drugs and violence. So I did kill her. By book 3, she was gone. And so I met this book signing, and I think it was actually, maybe for one of the Tennyson books. And this woman, there was a queue. This woman, she comes, "Hey, you, I want to talk to you." So she pushed this woman aside. She said, "I've got words to speak with you. Lorraine Page was my favorite character. I've read every book. I've read Cold Shoulder. I've read Cold Blood. And my God, you've gone and killed her. I'm never going to buy another book of yours. That's disgusting." And then she stormed off, and I sat there in shock. But the woman waiting for a book goes, "Could I have the trilogy?" So she bought the trilogy. Sometimes, you know, that.
Yeah.
I maybe should take some care sometimes. You know, I did let her go.
Yes.
Didn't realize sometimes the effect that you can have.
You can have with the characters, that they are so powerful. But I also, I can't help feeling that there's a little bit of nostalgia, and it cropped up when I was reading the first in the Jack Warr series. Somebody gets a line about, you know, back in the 80s when criminals were real criminals. You know, there's something about what was going on in the 80s that is very different from what's going on now in terms of crime. And I wondered if you'd got any comments about that. I mean, reflecting on, you know, the 80s widows and when you were writing then, and then where you are now with Vanished and the world that's changed.
I think we live in a very frightening world now. The invasion in your home, your privacy.
Yeah.
You have a computer, you can have somebody coming down the line. And I think the glorification of the era of the craze in the 60s, 70s, and even dipping down in the 80s, that has gone, because now it's fraud, online fraud, fraudsters. I mean, I don't think you'll meet anyone that hasn't had a phone call from somebody saying, "Hello, I've got information about your computer. I'm afraid you have a virus. Now, have you got a computer anywhere near you?" How many people I've known have been robbed because they've given all their computer details on the phone. So the crime is much more insidious now, very, very insidious. So that's one level. The actual drug infiltration is at a higher level than ever before. And it is very, very dangerous. They're using fentanyl now, combining it with heroin, the drop dead drug. And it's coming in at a vast amount in this country. And the cannabis, you know, either it's legalized or not legalized, you know, a lot of people smoking it for medication. So crime is taking different levels, all the time. Distant, they keep creeping up and creeping up. Armed robbery is not very much in the headlines. What is in the headlines now are young deaths, you know, knifing, gangs, young gangs, but they are kind of small fry, the actual big time robbers. And when you look at what is going on at the moment, with, you know, Britain saying we should do something about the Ukrainian bankers in this country, and you sit back and you think, hang on a second, how come one of them has got 30 million apartments, yachts, what money? And then you find another layer of high-powered lawyers that are covering for them. So the whole criminal status is in different levels now. Petty crime is up. You know, people sort of expect their car to be stolen. It's like, oh, yeah, well, I'm insured. You have to be. And so it's a very, very different level of crime. And I think it's hard to deal with, truthfully, to actually say to a pensioner, when somebody calls you on the phone and says there's a problem with your bank, just say, thank you very much. Put the phone down. Because, you know, they're stealing from pensioners, they're stealing. And you say, so that is a criminal, a fraudster. But they're really, I must have had maybe 10, 12 times somebody's called to say, I have a virus on my computer. I did hear a wonderful story in New York about a guy who got the call. And he said, oh, gosh, yes, I do have that computer. I do have a word processor. He said, but look, I'll tell you something. Could you hang on? Because my laptop is in my car down in the car park. He said, okay, I'll hang on. So he went and made himself a cup of tea, came back and he said, look, I've got the laptop, but you won't believe it. I've gone and left the plug in the car. So can you just hang on a bit more? So he went, made a sandwich, had a sandwich, still had the caller on the line. And he had this guy for 2.5 hours waiting for him, just to say that we now have control of your computer. You know.
Well, he probably was into crime prevention because he probably prevented a lot of crime in that 2.5 hours, as well as having his lunch. Now, listen, we're going to open up for some questions in the Q&A. We've got one sitting there now, which I think is a lovely one because it comes back to Widows again. And someone's written, Widows is also a movie with Viola Davis and Liam Neeson because there was an update, I believe. And this is where this person says, I first came across it and of course added it to my Lynda La Plante collection. Absolutely riveting on so many levels. And she says, how does the movie compare to the series? What can you say, Lynda, without compromising yourself?
What the movie did was reintroduce all the novels. That's what it did for me.
Yeah.
And they went worldwide, huge success of reissuing the novels, because, you know, it's very, very difficult to understand that, you know, as all the success throughout until I would say the past 4 or 5 years, I have been totally mishandled by agents, by lawyers. I've never had a lawyer check over a contract.
Right. And
the most frightening thing is when you're told you don't own Widows.
Oh my goodness me. That's so somewhere along the line you had signed over the rights to Widows.
Somewhere along the line. Agents that have just signed that. I might have probably in the days got like 150,000, which would have sounded like, you know, $1 million to me.
Yeah.
And so I literally am powerless when I don't own the characters.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went from such a peak of excitement when Steve McQueen approached me. And he was the director of 12 Years a Slave. I mean, got Oscar nominated. And he approached me and said, I have been a fan of Widows since I was a boy. I think because of having the wonderful Ava Motley, the Black actress in it. And he said, I want to make a movie of it. And I was so excited, and then discovered I didn't own it. Nothing. I had nothing. I had nothing.
Yeah.
In fact, I got a bouquet of flowers after steering a lot of the script and rewriting sections and trying. At one point, I explained to him that unless he has humor, you won't like the women. And he said, why? I said, because you have to love them. You have to like these women. There must be humor. And so, you know, even the very ending of the film, it ended on a terrible down.
Yeah.
It ended, the actual movie of Widows ended with the character playing Dorothy Rawlins, the wonderful Viola Davis, sitting alone in a restaurant, that she'd accomplished this payback against her husband. She'd got this money for nothing. She sat there, and I said to him, you can't leave it down. You have to lift her up, give her something. And he's quite a frightening person to be talking to. I am Steve McQueen. And he said, so what do you think it would be? What? And I said, you introduced the fact she had lost her son. He was murdered. I said, she has the money. She doesn't want the money. Doesn't mean anything to her. What did mean something to her was the loss of her son. I said, so why don't you do the end scene and make her in a restaurant or a cafe, wherever you want to put her, and we have somebody opposite, and she says, under the table is $1 million. I want a library in the name of my son. I said, she's done it. He just gave a brief nod.
Yeah.
And there it was. Never a thank you. No, strange. World is a very strange place.
Yeah.
For me, a thank you is exceedingly important in your life.
Yeah.
I couldn't work without all the scientists and forensic experts I work with and the police I work with without able to say thank you.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, we've got a question here about process, and I know that you've probably been asked this many times, but it is, do you plan your crime, I'm presuming crime fiction, all the way out before you start writing, or does it evolve as you write?
Some of it evolves. I either, a new character I might introduce, but basically I'm not that far ahead, but I'm an insomniac. And I mean, for example, last night, I was awake all night plotting about a body. I mean, do I have it decapitated? I mean, all night I was going on.
Yep.
And so then as I've always said, I stop work on a high. It means I want to go back to work the next day.
Yep.
And so if something's not quite gelling, I will literally rip it around my head for hours before I'm happy. And then I know. So in this new one I'm writing, I know where I want to go with it. I'm just on this very tricky section that I know I have to dig around. And, when I do research, it's sometimes I needed to, I'm not giving away much of the plot or anything, but I had to go to this crematorium, and I had to wait ages before I could talk to the right person at the crematorium. And he was very stern. And I said, basically, I want to know is it possible to bury two people in a coffin? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I said, do you check the coffin? He said, and then he gave me this wonderful piece of information. He said, do you know how much the ashes weigh? He said, imagine you have 2 pounds of sugar in your heart. He said, that's how much it weighs. If I've got 2 bodies, it doesn't make sense if there's 4 or 5 pounds of ashes. And I'm sitting there thinking, so that, from that, I go on, what's the heaviest part of the body? The head. So all last night I was thinking, maybe I should go back and say, take the head off. But that's how, but I also know where I'm going to get to.
Yeah. I
know.
Yeah. So
I know, for example, the point in writing the young Jane Tennyson, I'm showing the point where she's starting to chain smoke and why.
Yeah.
And that when she gives up, because I'm heading towards, you know, the time when Helen Mirren walked on and said, I'm DCI Jane Tennyson.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I'm nearly there. I'm nearly there.
You're nearly there.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I do have the sense that before you start, you know who your characters are and you know your end point, and then it's writing it through. We've got to
do research whilst you're working is often great feedback.
Yes.
You know, if you had researched everything and had it all neatly stacked up,
yeah.
But by doing research which answers questions you've got on your novel or script, it's good because you get incredible feedback.
Yeah.
And more information and more characters, unfortunately, sometimes.
Well, I mean, you know, everything that you talk about is encountering extraordinary people and extraordinary events. It's like nothing is wasted on Lynda La Plante. She's every detail counts, right?
Yeah.
We've got a lovely question from someone at one of our library views. Vicky Foggin asks, how can an aspiring author go about getting a meeting with an editor for advice like Lynda did?
Well, first off, go down the list of publishers in your area near you, even if it's a train journey away. Go down the list of publishers. Every publishing company have in-house editors. And I have learned by a polite request, you'll never turn down. And that will give you the opportunity to go and sit with an editor whose job is solely editing one novel after the other as they come in. And they will tell you how you go about editing. If you want to edit scripts, there are script editors.
Yeah.
It's literally always going to source. It's like, that is my biggest mantra. When you want to know something, don't make it up, go to source. Be it going to a crematorium, going to, you know, a funeral, go to source over and over again, because you will always get more than you bargained for.
Absolutely.
Always.
Okay, I've got a lovely question, which is probably going to be our last question tonight, which says, and this is from someone who is anonymous, perfectly happy with that, and says, after many decades of being involved in the criminal law, I saw the dark side of humanity. At times, it was a struggle to see the good in humanity. Does your work affect you in this way too at times, or are you always hopeful for humanity?
Oh, that's such a powerful question, actually.
It is.
Sometimes it makes me weep.
Yeah.
You know, the pain of things.
I agree.
Because I have always focused not on glamorizing the perpetrator. I focus on what happens to the victim, because I always feel there's never enough support for victims ever in anything. And, you know, writing for so many years, I've learned that you can have family liaison officers when your child or daughter or son is gone, but they can only stay with you for a certain amount of time. You still have that lingering pain. It never, ever, so that goes away. So there's no closure. And I think that is something, and the difference when you're doing a novel and even a film script, there's closure. But in real life, there is no closure. And I suppose because I knew it at first hand, always knew it, that I had a sister who died tragically. She was always 6 years old. She was always there. And I remember just before my mother died, somebody saying, how many children do you have? And she said 4. She didn't say 3 living, 1 dead. And so I understand the death of your loved one, what it does. When it's done in a revenge or pain or murder, it's terrible. And you just see that anguish, and it never, ever goes away. So I do feel deeply, but in a way, I'm all right, because I can believe in all that I'm writing, they're captured. It's over, that part.
That's a lovely answer, Lynda. And actually, somebody's just written a beautiful coda to our discussion today. It says, not really question, but an end note. Rather than Lyndaverse, can we use citizens of the planet La Plante? Which I rather like. Lynda,
Yes,
thank you so much. It's been,
yes.
I just wish I could give you a hug. This virtual stuff doesn't allow us to have another hug, but
Yes.
thank you so much. It's been a real joy talking to you, and I hope we meet again soon. And I'll hand back to Catherine, but thank you for your insights. They've been wonderful.
Can I just say thank you to, Sue, Catherine, and Sydney Crime Writers Festival for having me here. But also, I'd like to thank my publishers over there that have been so incredible, Alan and Unwin. And I really feel very honored to be guest on your show tonight.
Lynda, it's been such a pleasure. It has been wonderful. I've had lots of messages off stage saying, gee, this is good. This is the best one. This is the best one I've seen for ages, forever. So that's really good. And I think what I particularly liked is the sort of interplay between life and fiction and life and television. It all kind of blurs. With some people, it seems totally separate. It's like on a page and it's not real. But I love the story of people coming up just saying, how could you do that? You've killed my favorite character. Watch out, I'm going to kill you. And that's just, it's very rewarding and very, very, very good. And I would really recommend, I'll grab the book again, go to Booktopia or any bookshop, buy the book, buy the previous books, maybe buy the box set of Widows while you're there, like the lady who was, there we are. Well, actually you can't buy box sets of videos anyway, but you can stream it probably or something like that. But you can certainly buy the books. So thank you so much, Lynda. And also just to say thank you for something else. I had a message from your tech assistant saying that you'd like to donate something to our event tomorrow night, our fundraising event. I've sent him the details. And for anybody who's not, who doesn't, well, everybody in Australia knows about the really tragic floods, and we're running an event tomorrow for Lismore Library, which was, you can see that pile of books. It had just got back on its feet from a flood in the last couple of years. Boom, it's all gone again. And in fact, this weekend, this last few days, it's all been flooded again. So three fantastic Australian crime writers, Michael Robotham, Chris Hammer, and Candice Fox, have kindly donated their time, and they're talking to Kate Evans from Radio National, and they're going to talk about the books they've loved, the libraries they've loved, what crimes they think would be good in a library. So it's going to be a fantastic event. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, anybody who's watching online, go and grab one. Just go to Bad Sydney website and grab one. There are a couple of face-to-face tickets left, but lots of Zoom tickets. So there we are. That would be really good. You can join in as well, Lynda, if you'd like.
I will.
You've probably got a few things to do, a few books to write. Yeah. Just to let everybody know that next month, our writer will be Dovla McTiernan, who's got a new book called The Murder Rule. Her first book set outside Ireland. This one's set in America. It's a standalone book. She is not only a wonderful writer, but also a delightful person. So I'd really like to encourage you to come to that. Just hop on our website, Bad Sydney, and you can find out. But before we go, thank you again so much, Lynda. Just wonderful.
Thank you.
And we look forward maybe to having you again in person.
Yes, I'd love to. I'd love to be there. Yes.
We'd love to see you back in Australia. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye. Goodbye. God bless everyone. Stay safe.
You.